my name is Isabella, and today we're going to be reading Amelia Bedelia and Friends. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And we can get started. This is number 1 in the chapter book series, Amelia Bedelia and Friends, and it's called Amelia Bedelia and Friends Beat the Clock. Let's see. This is a 12-chapter chapter book, and we'll see how much we get through. Chapter 1, Choosing Sides, Good and Bad. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Amelia Bedelia's feet were talking to her. They were saying that she was walking under a giant oak tree laden with acorns. She closed her eyes and kept walking, listening to acorns being crushed under her sneakers with every step she took. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Amelia Bedelia imagined that if acorns could talk, they were probably saying, "Welcome to Oak Tree Elementary." The oak tree in front of her school was as old as it was enormous. Its leaves were just beginning to turn brown, a dusty brown that made the whole tree look as if it had been sprinkled with cocoa powder. "Boo!" hollered Clay. Amelia Bedelia jumped and opened her eyes. Her friend Clay had snuck up behind her. "Boo! You look like you're sleepwalking," said Clay, laughing. "Who can sleep through this racket?" said Amelia Bedelia. She jumped into the air and landed, crunch, 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 on some acorns. Clay covered his ears with his hands. "This tree is making acorns like that's its job," said Clay. "Well, I guess making acorns is its job," said Amelia Bedelia. "This tree doesn't have to practice the piano or learn how to speak Spanish or memorize multiplication tables or do word problems. The only thing this oak tree has to do is make acorns." "It is doing an awesome job of that," said Clay. "There are millions of them." "Right," said Amelia Bedelia, "like our school motto says." "Mighty oaks from little acorns grow," chanted Amelia Bedelia and Clay together. They said good morning to Miss Hotchkiss and Mrs. Roman as they passed the school office. Mrs. Hotchkiss was the principal, but Mrs. Roman, her assistant, really ran the school. Everyone knew that, even Miss Hotchkiss. "I like your necklace, Mrs. Roman," said Clay. "Thank you, Clay. You're very thoughtful," said Mrs. Roman, smiling. Clay whispered to Amelia Bedelia, "I always give Mrs. Roman a compliment. You never want to be on her bad side." Amelia Bedelia turned around to look at Mrs. Roman. Her left side looked the same as her right side. Amelia Bedelia did not see a bad side. She was about to ask Clay what he meant when Mrs. Shock greeted them at the door of their classroom. "How nice of you two to honor us with your presence," said Mrs. Shock. She watched them take their seats, living up to her unofficial nickname, the Hawk. A second later, Miss Hotchkiss read the morning announcements over the intercom. "Good morning, everyone. This is a reminder that next week we will be celebrating the 100th birthday of Oak Tree Elementary. So get ready. There will be lots of food and fun and music, games and activities for all. Make sure you thank your parents and teachers for all the work they have been put into to make this event a success." Miss Hotchkiss passed the microphone to Mrs. Roman. Mrs. Roman was in charge of finding out trivia about the school to build interest for the 100th birthday celebration. "Here's today's fun fact about Oak Tree Elementary," said Mrs. Roman. "Did you know that it takes an oak tree 20 to 30 years to start producing acorns?" Then Mrs. Roman read the day's cafeteria menu. Cheers and clapping erupted when Mrs. Roman announced that pizza was for lunch. "My dad says that Romans make the best pizza," said Clay. "Now that is a fun fact." "Mrs. Roman said only pizza," said Amelia Bedelia. "She did not make the pizza, and she is not a Roman." "I like to give her all the credit to stay on her good side," explained Clay. Amelia Bedelia shrugged and looked out the classroom window. She had a great view of the giant oak tree that gave their school its name. She loved watching the seasons change as the leaves turned, then blew away, only to pop out again in the spring. Mrs. Shock had once told Amelia Bedelia that she had the best seat in the house. "This is my school, not my house," Amelia Bedelia had replied, "but I definitely have the best view." Chapter 2. 1 year times 100 equals Centennial. During the announcements, Mrs. Shock had been busy writing on the board. After the applause for pizza had died down, she pointed out what she had written and asked, "Has anyone seen these letters around the school? MCM XX. "Is this another language or English?" asked Pat. "That doesn't look like an English word to me." You're right, says Mrs. Shock. It's Latin. Like they speak in Latin America, said Heather. No. Spanish, Portuguese, and other languages are spoken in Latin America. This is Latin like they spoke in ancient Rome, said Mrs. Shock. Today, Latin is a dead language. Is that what zombies speak? Asked Pat. Zombies don't speak. That's why they're zombies, said Penny. These letters stand for Roman numerals, said Mrs. Shock. Clay was nodding at Amelia Bedelia. She could tell what he was thinking, that Mrs. Roman was so important that she even had her own numbers. You people walk right past these letters twice a day, said Mrs. Shock. Joy raised her hand. Oh, I know, she said. They're carved on the stone near the front door. That's right. You're very observant, Joy, said Mrs. Shock. These letters were carved into a stone block called the Cornerstone. The Cornerstone was the first thing the builders who built our school put in place. All the other stone blocks and bricks were built after it. Is that like when people put numbers and letters on license plates to spell the joke? Asked Angel. Like LA10SEZ, said Clay. Yeah, said Cliff. Latin is easy. You guys, ENF-SENF. They thought about that for a second. Then they nodded. Okay, said Cliff. I see, said Clay. CDB, said Joy. And Q, said Mrs. Shock. The builder carved those Roman numerals to record the year the building was built. What year was MCMXX? Said Heather. Reading Roman numerals is like breaking up code, said Mrs. Shock. So the letters are numbers and the numbers are letters, said Amelia Bedelia. Exactly, Amelia Bedelia, said Mrs. Shock. The letter M stands for the number 1000. The letter X is 10. Now, what if you have two M's and two X's? That is 2000 plus 20, said Dawn. That's this year, 2020, said Rose. That's right, said Mrs. Shock. The year 2020 is written MMXX in Roman numerals. But our Cornerstone has a C between the two M's, said Joy. Wow, thought Amelia Bedelia. Mrs. Shock was right about Joy. She definitely saw things that most people didn't notice. Good point, said Mrs. Shock. Well, the letter C comes from the Latin word cent, which means 100. That's where we get the word century, which means 100 years. And a cent is 1/100th of a dollar. Our class has our very own cent, said Amelia Bedelia. Her name is Penny. Amelia Bedelia grabbed Penny by the wrist, pulling her to her feet to take a bow. The rule with Roman numerals is that putting a letter in front of another one subtracts that amount, said Mrs. Shock. So putting a C in front of an M subtracts 100 from the 1000. That makes 900, said Joy. The first M is 1000 and the second is 900. So the year is 1900, plus 20 makes it 1920. And you write it MCMXX. And that is why we were having a centennial celebration, said Mrs. Shock. A centennial is a celebration that happens every 100 years, said Heather. My great-grandmother just had hers. Centennial comes from Latin too, said Mrs. Shock. For a dead language, Latin sure keeps popping up, said Amelia Bedelia. Latin must be a zombie language, said Cliff. It refuses to die. Why didn't the ancient Romans just use regular numbers, asked Chip. I think Roman numerals look older and more important, said Holly. Expensive watches use Roman numerals, said Mrs. Shock. Some people think it makes them look more elegant. Roman numerals are fun, said Clay. If I gave you a quiz on them, would you get 100%, asked Mrs. Shock. Yup, because percent is Latin, said Clay. Amelia Bedelia was raising her hand to ask about percentages when the voice of doom came over the intercom. Mrs. Shock, I still need an attendance report from you, said Mrs. Roman. Amelia Bedelia froze with her hands still up in the air. Even Mrs. Shock was so startled that she jumped. Oh, thanks for volunteering, Amelia Bedelia, said Mrs. Shock, writing down the attendance number on a slip of paper and handing it to Amelia Bedelia. Let's see if Mrs. Roman lives up to her name. Amelia Bedelia shrugged. She hadn't meant to volunteer, but it was always fun to be sent on a mission during class. When she passed Clay on the way out, he caught her arm and whispered, You lucky duck. Just remember, Mrs. Roman probably invented those numbers, so stay on her good side. Quack, said Amelia Bedelia with a laugh. Chapter 3. Watch it, watch it. Amelia Bedelia waddled as fast as she could down the hall. When she was sure that no one was looking, she started running, but by the time she got to the office, she was out of breath. "My goodness, Amelia Bedelia," said Miss Hotchkiss. "Even I can walk to your classroom without getting winded." Mrs. Roman's eyes narrowed to slits. "Amelia Bedelia, you did walk here, correct?" she said. Amelia Bedelia couldn't catch her breath. Finally, she nodded and handed Mrs. Roman the piece of paper that Miss Chalk had given her. Mrs. Roman opened the attendance report. She turned it around and finally turned it upside down. Frowning, she looked at Amelia Bedelia. "Is this a joke, Amelia Bedelia?" asked Mrs. Roman. "What kind of number is this?" Uh-oh, thought Amelia Bedelia. It looked like when Mrs. Roman was unhappy, her bad side was her front. Mrs. Roman was still squinting at Amelia Bedelia and shaking her head back and forth when Miss Hotchkiss took the piece of paper from her. Miss Hotchkiss laughed. "Would you read this for Mrs. Roman, Amelia Bedelia?" she asked. "XX is 20, plus V is 5, plus II is 2, which equals 27, said Amelia Bedelia. "Perfect," said Miss Hotchkiss, "and perfect attendance. You should study your Roman numerals, Miss Roman." "Mrs. Chalk wondered if you would live up to your name," said Amelia Bedelia. "Oh, she did she?" said Mrs. Roman. "Yup. And Clay said you had invented Roman numerals and named them after yourself," said Amelia Bedelia. Miss Hotchkiss laughed again. "Sounds like Clay is trying to get on my bad side," said Mrs. Roman. Oh no, thought Amelia Bedelia. She had wanted to stay on Mrs. Roman's good side. Now she was on her bad side, dragging Miss Chalk and Clay along with her. If she had made Mrs. Roman mad at Clay, Amelia Bedelia would not be a lucky duck in his eyes. She would be a dead duck. "Oh, Clay never wants to be on your bad side," said Amelia Bedelia. "But I don't think you have a bad side. Your front, back, and both sides all look good to me." "Thank you so much," said Mrs. Roman, smiling. "That's very nice of you." "Don't thank me yet," said Mr. Jack, the school's custodian, as he walked into the office. Mr. Jack went by his first name, because he said he was a jack of all trades. "Wait until I finish your job. I put the easel in the lobby. Now, which picture do you want moved out there?" "The one on the wall behind the counter," said Miss Hotchkiss. It was the first photograph of the students and teachers of Oak Tree Elementary, taken in 1920. She pointed at a large, framed black and white photograph. Amelia Bedelia had always wondered who the people in the photograph were. She had been in the office lots of times, but had never had the chance to ask. "Is that really our school?" she said. "You bet, Amelia Bedelia. Look right here," said Mrs. Roman, pointing to a little tree in the foreground. This little sapling grew to be a giant oak tree out front. "It's a really big picture," said Amelia Bedelia. "They must have used a huge camera." "The original picture was small. I'm sure they blew it up," said Miss Hotchkiss. "Really?" said Amelia Bedelia. "They blew it up?" "They enlarged it as much as possible," said Mrs. Roman. "Need any help, Mr. Jack?" "I'll try it single-handedly, but this thing is heavier than it looks," Mr. Jack said. It must be heavy, thought Amelia Bedelia. Mr. Jack was using both of his hands to lift it, carrying it double-handedly. She was standing between Mr. Jack and the office door. She was about to move out of the way when Mr. Jack asked for her help. Watch it, said Mr. Jack, walking towards Amelia Bedelia with a huge framed photo. He seemed to have some trouble seeing where he was going. "Watch it," he said to Amelia Bedelia again. As usual, Amelia Bedelia did what she was told. She watched the framed picture. She did not move at all. Bam! The frame crashed into the counter. Mr. Jack set the photograph down on the floor, leaning against the front of the counter. "I was asking Amelia Bedelia to be more careful and move out of my way," he explained, looking embarrassed. "That's okay. It was an accident," said Miss Hotchkiss. "Accidents happen," said Mrs. Roman. Amelia Bedelia was relieved. She must be on Mrs. Roman's good side after all. That was when Amelia Bedelia spied the envelope that had fallen to the floor when the framed photograph hit the counter. She picked it up. It was addressed to the principal in beautiful cursive handwriting. She handed it to Miss Hotchkiss. "What's this for?" said Miss Hotchkiss. "It's for the principal. That's you," said Amelia Bedelia. "It is written in cursive writing." "Cursive writing is becoming a lost art, like Roman numerals," said Mrs. Roman. "But where did this envelope come from?" said Miss Hotchkiss. "From the photo," said Amelia Bedelia. "Mr. Jack was telling me to watch it, and I was watching it. And I saw the envelope fall onto the floor when the picture frame banged the counter." Mrs. Roman took the envelope from Miss Hotchkiss. She used a sharp letter opener to slit open the top edge. It would be a shame to tear into an envelope this pretty, she said. Someone took a lot of trouble to make it look so nice. She handed it to Miss Hotchkiss, who kept staring down at it. I can't stand the suspense, said Mrs. Roman. Would you like me to read it for you? Thank you, but I can do it. It is addressed to me after all, said Miss Hotchkiss. I'm just surprised, and I do love a mystery. She pulled the letter out of the envelope and unfolded it. It was written in the same fancy cursive writing. Amelia Bedelia noticed that Miss Hotchkiss was moving her lips as she read silently. Oh my, Miss Hotchkiss said, looking up at them. Then she kept reading. What does it say? Asked Mrs. Roman. My, said Miss Hotchkiss. Is that all it says? Asked Amelia Bedelia. After she'd read a little more, Miss Hotchkiss looked up again. Oh my goodness, she said, then went back to reading. Is it a bill? Is something broken? Did something flood? Asked Mr. Jack. Oh my goodness gracious, said Miss Hotchkiss. She handed the note to Mrs. Roman. Read it yourself. Read it to everybody. That picture hanging the counter was no accident. Chapter 4. Breaking News. Since Mrs. Roman hadn't had the chance to read the note yet, she began by reading it to herself. This is incredible, she said. Then she went back to the beginning to read it out loud. She held it up, pointing at the date in the upper right-hand corner. This letter is dated October 1920. She said. Then she began. October 1st, 1920. I write this in the year 1920. My name is Peter Hoffman. I am the first principal of our school's new town, Oak Tree Elementary. Our town has plenty of monuments, statues, and plaques that celebrate the noble achievements of our citizens. We would also like to celebrate the students who pass through the doors of our school. To honor the daily lives of ordinary citizens, we've gathered an assortment of everyday objects from daily life in our town. We want to give future generations an idea of how we worked and played and thought and felt. We've collected these items in a time capsule to be opened 100 years from now, in the year 2020. You'll find it buried at the base of the old oak tree in the direction of true north. Good luck, be well and prosper. I remain your humble servant, Peter C. Hoffman. Isn't this incredible, said Miss Hotchkiss. Here we are, about to celebrate our school's 100th birthday, when a letter about a Centennial time capsule falls in our lap. It fell on the floor first, said Amelia Bedelia. Now all we have to do is find that time capsule before the party, said Mrs. Roman. Well, we've got 5 days to beat the clock, said Miss Hotchkiss. Mrs. Roman, I am putting you in charge. Here's the first thing we should do, said Mrs. Roman. Let's get the whole school involved. We'll make an announcement about the time capsule. I'll tell the story of what happened in the office today, and Amelia Bedelia can read Principal Hoffman's letter to everyone. Miss Hotchkiss, Mrs. Roman, and Amelia Bedelia gathered around the microphone. Sounds like a good plan, said Miss Hotchkiss. Mr. Jack, we may need a shovel. Attention, this is your principal, said Miss Hotchkiss into the mic. I'm sorry to interrupt your work, but we have some very important news. Smash. Tinkly plinkly plink. In his hurry, Mr. Jack had snagged his foot on the picture frame. The whole thing fell over and hit the floor hard, shattering the glass. They could barely look at each other without bursting out laughing. I'll go get a broom, too, said Mr. Jack, shaking his head. Miss Hotchkiss gestured for Mrs. Roman to take over. Finally, Mrs. Roman stopped laughing long enough to tell the students of Oak Tree Elementary about the accident that had led to the discovery of the letter, and to introduce Amelia Bedelia. Amelia Bedelia stepped up to the microphone. I would like to read you a letter written 100 years ago, said Amelia Bedelia. Then she stopped. It wasn't because she had said such a strange thing, although it was strange to think of reading a message that had taken a century to reach them rather than a minute or even a second. No, she was feeling weird hearing the sound of her own voice. Of course, she heard herself speak every day. But now she was imagining her voice echoing down the halls, rebounding off lockers and bouncing off bulletin boards, through the gym and cafeteria and library, into every classroom in the school, including her own. She wondered what her friends were thinking. Were they wondering what had happened to her? She was only supposed to deliver the attendance record, but she had been gone a long time. Did her voice sound funny? Did they think she sounded like herself? Were they paying attention? Finally, she read the letter. I write this in the year 1920. My name is Peter Hoffman. I'm the first principal of our town's new school, Oak Tree Elementary. Our town has plenty of monuments, statues, and plaques that celebrate the noble achievements of our citizens. We would also like to celebrate the students that pass through the doors of our school. To honor the lives of ordinary citizens, we've gathered an assortment of everyday objects from daily life in our town. We want to give future generations an idea of how we worked, played, thought, and felt. We've gathered these items in a time capsule to be opened 100 years from now in the year 2020. You'll find it buried at the base of the old oak tree in the direction of true north. Good luck, be well and prosper. I remain your humble servant, Peter C. Hoffman. On our way back to class, Amelia Bedelia sensed a surge of excitement flowing through the school as if someone had switched on an electric current. When she got back to her room, she was a celebrity. Her friends and classmates gathered around to ask her questions. Question, was that you on the intercom? Answer, yes. Question, are you famous? Answer, no. Question, is it true you saw the letter first? Answer, yes. Question, can I have your autograph? Answer, sure. Mrs. Shock had wasted no time. She had written time capsule on the board. She asked Angel to look up the term in the dictionary and read the definition out loud. A container holding historical records or objects representative of current culture that is deposited, as in the earth or in a cornerstone, for preservation until discovery by some future age, read Angel. Amelia Bedelia hardly ever thought about the past or the future. She liked to focus on the here and now. And right this minute, she wanted to find that the 100-year-old time capsule, open it up, and discover what was inside. Chapter 5, Cracked Up to Be. That night, after her homework, Amelia Bedelia and her parents sat down to supper. It looked delicious, as always. Amelia Bedelia knew the news of her day would change her life. She was savoring the feeling of anticipation, making sure she would be able to remember what their lives were like before the time capsule. Anything earth-shattering happened in school today? Asked her father. The earth was okay, said Amelia Bedelia. It was a glass-shattering day. Then she told him about the Roman numerals, taking the attendance report to the office. Mrs. Roman sides, Mr. Jack moving the framed photograph, watching it, but not watching it. The picture dropping in the glass shattering, discovering a note from 100 years ago, then announcing that news to the whole school and becoming a celebrity. Amelia Bedelia was halfway through her story when she noticed her parents had stopped eating. They were leaning towards her, their eyes wide, listening as hard as they could. When she finished, Amelia Bedelia took her first bite of lasagna. Delicious, Mom, said Amelia Bedelia. Her parents were still stunned by her story. They looked at each other and back at her. All that went on before lunch, sweetie, said her mother. Every bit. The afternoon was much calmer, said Amelia Bedelia. Thank goodness. If I had gone through all that, I would have come home for a nap, said her father. Wow, that is incredible. What's next? Asked her mother. Miss Hotchkiss wants to dig up the time capsule, said Amelia Bedelia. She wants to display it at our Centennial celebration. What fun, said her mother. That would be a huge feather in her cap. Amelia Bedelia thought that getting to see Miss Hotchkiss wearing a cap with an enormous feather in it was even more reason to find that time capsule. When they find it, it will be interesting to see what the teachers and students in 1920 put inside to share with the students and teachers in 2020, said her mother. There are time capsules in existence that won't be opened for thousands of years, said her father. Thousands of years, said Amelia Bedelia. Nothing lasts that long. Who's going to remember where they buried it? Well, when explorers discover an ancient tomb, like those in Egypt, it's sort of a time capsule. Sometimes they find jewelry and furniture and scrolls, along with combs and mirrors and caves and other stuff. Since those things are more than 4,000 years old, a tomb can be a time capsule of sorts. Amelia Bedelia shook her head. I can't imagine waiting 4,000 years for something. Christmas comes once a year, but it feels like it takes forever to get here. Grandma says that Christmas comes quicker for her every year, which is weird. Time is relative, said her mother. A relative like Grandma? Asked Amelia Bedelia. No, sweetie, said her father. Relative like compared to something else. Grandma has seen way more Christmases than you. No matter what age you are, there are always 365 days between Christmases every year. But as you get older, it sometimes feels as though it comes sooner and sooner. And when you are younger, it feels like it takes forever. Sooner or later, the future is coming, believe it or not, said her mother. When it comes to the future, there's only one thing you can be sure of. It never turns out quite like they say it will, said her father. According to the magazines I read when I was your age, we should have a small helicopter in our driveway instead of a car. Flying to school in a helicopter? Cool, said Amelia Bedelia. And you, continued her dad, would be zooming around with your jetpack instead of riding your bike. Can I get one for my birthday? Asked Amelia Bedelia, even though that day felt like it was a long time away. Sure, right after I get my helicopter, said her father. I can remember scientists saying that no one would have to eat anymore, said her mother. A whole meal would be contained in one tiny pill. That does not sound delicious at all, said Amelia Bedelia. That's probably why it never caught on, said her father, standing up to clear the table. That is the only good thing about taking a pill instead of cooking and eating is not having to do any dishes. Amelia Bedelia joined her father at the sink, drying what he washed. Then we'd have more time to race around with our jetpacks, she said. I don't know why I did that twice. I think now is a good stopping point because it's been about 30 minutes. For those who aren't familiar, Amelia Bedelia is a character that takes everything very literally, as in she doesn't understand metaphors and stuff. So when Mr. Jack told her to watch it, he was really telling her to watch out and not crush into him, but Amelia Bedelia thought he meant watch it, as in look at the painting. You can tell that Amelia Bedelia doesn't really catch on to metaphors very well, and she takes everything as it is said. Some of you might be familiar with the original Amelia Bedelia books. These are chapter books based off the original Amelia Bedelia books, which I read when I was your age. I hope you guys enjoyed the first half of this. I'm going to be reading the other half in a separate video so you can watch that when it comes out. Thank you guys. Bye.